She was pregnant, she was black, and they threw her into the rain like she was nothing. Not gently, not with hesitation. A hand around her arm, wide, cold, purposeful. And then the door closing behind her before she had even finished falling. The wet pavement came up fast, her knee, her hip, her shoulder. And before any other instinct could fire, before the pain had even registered, her hand went to her stomach. She protected the baby before she protected herself. She lay there on the cold, wet asphalt outside the Hargrove mansion, soaking, broken sandal twisted beneath her ankle, her bag spilled open beside her, the rain washing over her face, and the lights inside the house stayed on. The curtains didn't move. No one came. They had thrown her out like a problem that had been solved. But what none of them knew, what Brittany Hargrove, in all her pearls and composure and old money certainty, could not have imagined in her worst nightmare, was that the woman lying on that ground was not powerless. She was not alone. And the child she was carrying in that moment, the child she shielded with her bare hand against the cold pavement, was not just any child. That child carried the bloodline of the most feared man in the city. And he was about to turn the corner. The Korean Mafia boss with the dragon tattooed up his neck, the man entire organizations feared to name out loud, the man who had built an empire on the principle that the most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody notices has arrived, was 3 seconds away from finding her on the ground. And nothing would ever be the same for the Hargrove family again. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. There are moments in history, small, private, witnessed by almost no one, that carry the full weight of everything that comes after. Not battles, not signed documents, not speeches delivered to thousands, just a door closing, just a body hitting wet pavement, just a woman lying on the ground in the rain while the people who put her there walk back inside and pour themselves a drink, certain they have won something. This is one of those moments. The rain had been falling on the city for 3 hours before any of this happened. It came the way November rain always comes in this part of the country, not dramatically, not with thunder or warning, but steadily, patiently, as if the sky had simply made a decision and intended to keep it. The streets reflected yellow from the street lamps. The iron gate of the Hargrove estate glistened, the stone steps leading to the rear servants' entrance, the door they had chosen specifically because the front door was reserved for people they considered worth seeing, were slick with a film of water thin enough to be invisible until your foot was already on it. Serena Caldwell did not see it in time. She had not been given time to see anything. The hand on her arm, Dale's hand, wide as a dinner plate and about as gentle, had not been interested in her footing. It had been interested in removal, in the specific and deliberate transfer of a problem from inside the house to outside it, where the problem would become the street's concern, or the rain's concern, or no one's concern at all. She was 28 years old. She was 4 months pregnant. She was wearing a dark green floral dress that had cost her $63 at a consignment shop on Mercer Street, back when she still had $63 to spend freely, and a beige knit cardigan she had owned since her second year of college, soft enough at the elbows to be embarrassing, warm enough at the chest to be worth keeping. She had dressed carefully that morning, the way a person dresses when they are trying to be taken seriously. She had not dressed for a fall. But she fell. The moment happened in the way that defining moments always do. Too fast to process, too slow to forget. The step, the slick stone, the arm releasing her not out of mercy but out of completion. The task done, the door already beginning to close. Her left sandal caught nothing. Her right knee hit the pavement first, then her hip, then the side of her shoulder, and then she was down. Fully down. On the wet asphalt of the service alley behind the Hargrove property. And the rain was already soaking through the cardigan, through the dress, through everything, and the caramel leather crossbody bag she wore had swung around on impact and spilled lip balm, a pen, her transit card, and the folded square of ultrasound paper that she had carried with her every day for 6 weeks, like a talisman or a prayer, or both. She did not reach for any of it. Her hand went to her stomach. It went there before the pain registered, before the shock, before any conscious thought assembled itself into language. The body makes its priorities known before the mind catches up. And Serena Caldwell's body knew, even in the moment of impact, what mattered most to protect. She pressed her palm flat against her abdomen, gentle, firm, instinctive, and lay on the wet ground and let the rain fall on her face and stared up at the black sky and understood, with a clarity that was almost peaceful, that she had never been safe in that house. Not for one single night. She had told herself otherwise, the way people do when the alternative is too large to hold. She had told herself that Chad was different from his mother, that Brittany Hargrove's coldness was the coldness of a private person, not a cruel one. That the house's grandeur was simply the aesthetic of old money, not the armor of people who believed themselves categorically superior to anyone outside their bloodline. She had told herself these things standing in the guest room they'd given her on the 3rd floor. The smallest room, she had noticed, with the window that faced the building next door rather than the garden. And she had told herself these things at the dinner table, when Brittany's eyes moved across her face with an expression that was not hostility exactly, but was something worse. The complete absence of recognition. The look of someone who had not yet decided whether you were a person. She knew now what Brittany had decided. The door at the top of the service steps did not reopen. No one looked out the window. The alley offered her nothing. Not shelter, not a bench, not a single overhang wide enough to matter. Just the gate at the far end, the street lamp beyond it, and the city continuing its wet and indifferent November business on the other side of the iron bars. Serena pressed her hand harder against her stomach. She was not crying, or rather, she was crying, but the rain had made it academic. The tears simply part of the larger wetness, indistinguishable and therefore private in the only way she had left. She thought about getting up. She thought about it the way you think about a very difficult math problem, aware of the solution in the abstract, uncertain about the execution. Her knee throbbed. Her shoulder ached from the impact. The broken sandal strap lay useless beneath her ankle. She had nowhere to go. This is the detail that matters. Not the fall itself. Falls can be recovered from. Not the humiliation. Humiliation she had survived before. What matters, what constitutes the actual hinge point of everything that follows, is the geography of her situation in that moment. The Hargrove house behind her, gate locked. Her phone inside, taken from the hall table by Dale with the practiced efficiency of a man who had done this kind of removal before, who had perhaps done it so many times that he had developed a system for which personal items to confiscate in order to maximize helplessness. Her money, what little remained, in an account she could not access without the card now soaking in the open bag beside her. The ultrasound paper, softening in the rain, the image of the child she had not planned and had not announced and had not yet told the right person about, beginning to blur at the edges. She was lying on the ground in the rain outside a mansion, pregnant, alone, and without a working phone. And this specific configuration of powerlessness, this precise arrangement of a woman the world had decided did not matter, is the condition under which Kwon Jae-won turned the corner. He was not supposed to be on this street at this hour. The Fantasma de Seoul, though he would not have used that name, had never used it himself, had only heard it spoken by other people in rooms he had left before they realized he had been listening, operated by roots. He was a man of roots and patterns and deliberate invisibility, a man who had spent 15 years building an empire specifically on the principle that the most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody notices has arrived. He had come from the direction of the Han River Kitchen 3 blocks north, where a conversation about a debt 4 months overdue had been concluded in the particular silence that follows a very specific kind of promise. His car was waiting 2 blocks south. He had chosen to walk the distance between them because November air, even wet November air, was preferable to the interior of a car when he needed to think. He was thinking about the debt. He was thinking about the meeting tomorrow with the Port Authority contacts in Jersey. He was thinking, in the distracted and involuntary way of someone who has trained themselves not to think about certain things, about 4 months ago, about a hotel room in Midtown, and an argument, and a door closing, and a woman's back as she walked away from him, with the particular posture of someone who has made a decision they believe is permanent. He turned the corner. He saw her. And every thought he had been carrying, the debt, the port, the controlled and organized machinery of his life, stopped as cleanly as a clock unplugged from the wall. He recognized the cardigan first. He did not know why he remembered the cardigan. He remembered it from a night in March, months before the argument, when she had fallen asleep on his couch wearing it, and he had stood in the kitchen doorway for longer than he intended to admit, watching her sleep, understanding for the first time in his adult life that he was in the presence of something he did not know how to protect without destroying. He recognized the cardigan. And then he recognized her. And then he saw the hand on the stomach. The city kept raining. The street lamp kept burning. Kwon Jae-won stood perfectly still on the wet pavement above the woman lying on the ground, and in the 7 seconds it took for his mind to process what his eyes were showing him, the entire architecture of the life he had built, the empire, the roots, the careful, invisible machinery, rearranged itself around a single and irrevocable new fact. He had a reason now that had nothing to do with territory. Serena. She heard her name the way you hear something in a dream that pulls you back toward waking. Distant first, then suddenly close, then undeniable. Her eyes, which had been fixed on the black sky above her, moved toward the sound before her mind had finished deciding whether to believe it. He was standing at the edge of the lamplight. The rain fell through the yellow glow above him and broke apart around his shoulders. And for a moment, just a moment, in the particular delirium of cold and shock and wet pavement, she thought she had imagined him. She had imagined him before, in the weeks after she left, in the middle of ordinary tasks, in the silence between one thought and the next. She had trained herself out of it, the way you train yourself out of any habit that costs you more than you can afford. But here, now, in the alley behind the house of the people who had just thrown her out into the rain, The imagining felt crueler than usual, and she closed her eyes against it. She heard the footsteps, unhurried, certain. The specific rhythm of someone who has never needed to run toward anything in his life, because the things he wants have always understood that waiting for him was the correct decision. She opened her eyes. He was crouching beside her. Not standing over her, crouching, his knees bent, his level dropped to meet hers, the thorn of his black suit jacket grazing the wet asphalt with complete indifference to the damage. The dragon on his neck was at eye level from where she lay. She had traced that tattoo once, in the dark, with one finger, while he slept and she could not. Studying it the way you study something beautiful that also frightens you. Understanding that both things were true simultaneously, and that the truth of one did not cancel the truth of the other. His hand came toward her face, and she did not flinch. She had never flinched from him, which had surprised her the first time she realized it, given everything she knew about what he was and who he worked for, and what the dragon on his neck meant to the people who feared it. But fear had always been the wrong response to Quan Ji-wan, at least where she was concerned. He had never given her a reason for fear. He had given her reasons for other things, confusion and longing, and the particular ache of wanting something you have decided you cannot keep. But never fear. His hand moved the soaking curtain of her hair from her face, and his touch was the same as she remembered it. Precise and careful, and entirely without performance. Who did this? It was not a question. She had forgotten that about him. The way his sentences arrived without the upward inflection of uncertainty, every word already knowing where it was going before it left his mouth. I fell, she said. Serena. Just her name again. Just the 2 syllables, weighted differently the second time. Not recognition now, but something that functioned as a warning. The way a very calm person's voice functions as a warning precisely because it does not rise. She looked at him and he looked at her, and 4 months of silence compressed itself into the space between them with the density of something much longer. I tripped on the step, she said. It was wet. He said nothing. He looked at the gate at the end of the alley. He looked at the service entrance at the top of the steps, closed, lightless from the outside, giving nothing away. He looked at the bag on the ground beside her, open, contents spread across the wet pavement in the careless arrangement of things that had been spilled rather than placed. His eyes moved across each item with the systematic attention of a man who reads a scene the way other people read text, parsing it, cataloging it, arriving at conclusions before others have finished forming their first question. His eyes stopped on the ultrasound paper. It was folded in quarters, or had been. The rain had softened the creases, the corners lifting away from each other, the image inside beginning to show at the edges. A small gray shape, a white outline. The specific and unmistakable vocabulary of a sonogram, printed on thermal paper that was never designed to survive being left in the rain. He did not reach for it. He looked at it for exactly the amount of time required to understand what it was, and then he looked back at her, and the expression on his face was the same expression she had seen only once before in all the time she had known him. Not cold, not calculating, not the composed blankness he wore like a second skin in every room where someone might be watching. Something underneath all of that. Something that had not yet learned to hide itself. How many months? Again, no upward inflection, just the words, quiet and direct, landing on her like the rain. Patient, inevitable, not asking permission. She could have lied. The number of times in her life that lying had seemed like the most survivable option was not small. And this moment, on the ground, in the rain, looking up at a man whose world operated by rules entirely unlike any she had chosen to live by, this moment offered lying as an almost reasonable choice. She could have said it was someone else's. She could have said she didn't know. She could have said the number and let ambiguity do the rest. She said, 4. The rain fell. He stayed crouched beside her for a moment that had no comfortable length, his eyes on her face, his hand having moved from her hair to the pavement beside her shoulder. Not touching her now, but close, the way you keep a door slightly open even when you are not ready to walk through it. Then he stood. He rose to his full height in one fluid motion and extended his hand toward her, palm up, open, and she understood immediately that this was not an automatic gesture for him. That Kwon Jae-won did not extend his open palm to people as a reflex. That his hands were not in the habit of offering themselves without calculation. And that the calculation, this time, had produced something that looked almost tender. "Get up," he said. "Jae, I don't want—" "I'm not asking what you want." His voice did not harden. If anything, it softened further, which was more unsettling than hardness would have been. "I'm telling you that you're not going to spend another minute on this ground. That's not a negotiation." She looked at his hand. She looked at the ring, the black dragon signet on his index finger, the gold of the Patek Philippe at his wrist, catching the lamplight the way expensive things catch light, effortlessly and without trying. She looked at the tattoo on his neck, the dragon coiled and permanent. And she thought about everything that tattoo had ever meant to her, and everything she had ever told herself it meant, and whether any of her conclusions had been correct. She took his hand. He pulled her up with an ease that reminded her, as it always had, that the gentleness he used with her was chosen, that it required the active suppression of a considerable physical and psychological force that operated at every other moment of his life. He held her upright until her footing was certain, and then his hand went to the small of her back. Brief, steadying, gone again before it could be called anything. He crouched again, quickly, and gathered the spilled contents of her bag from the wet pavement. The lip balm, the transit card, the pen. He picked up the ultrasound paper last, handling it with a care so deliberate it was almost painful to watch. 2 fingers at the driest remaining corner, lifting it from the asphalt as though it were something ancient and irreplaceable. He did not look at the image. He folded it loosely along lines that no longer held, and placed it inside the bag and handed the bag to her without comment. His phone was already in his other hand. He had made a call before she finished adjusting the strap on her shoulder. The call lasted 4 seconds and consisted of an address and a room number and 3 words in Korean that she did not speak well enough to translate, but recognized by tone as something in the range of immediately. "There's a car coming," he said. "I can't just—" "The car is coming for you," he said. "Not with me. A driver, an address, a place that is safe and warm and does not belong to anyone who would put you on the ground." He looked at her directly, and the directness of it, the complete absence of deflection from a man whose entire professional existence was constructed from deflection, was its own kind of statement. "You can leave in the morning if you want to. You can tell me never to come near you again. But tonight, you are not standing in the rain." She wanted to argue. She recognized the architecture of the situation. The way his help arrived shaped like certainty rather than charity. The way it foreclosed objection not through force, but through the simple immovability of his conviction. She had argued with that immovability before, and she knew its topography well enough to understand that tonight, standing on one broken sandal in a soaking cardigan in the alley where she had been thrown, she did not have the ground for it. Literally or otherwise. "Okay," she said. He nodded once. The small, precise nod of a man for whom yes is never surprising, but is always, quietly, a relief. He did not walk away immediately. He stood beside her in the rain, not touching, not speaking, until the headlights of the car appeared at the end of the alley. And in that silence, while the rain fell on both of them with the same democratic patience it fell on everything else, Serena became aware of something shifting in the specific quality of the air between them. Something that had been suspended for 4 months beginning, very quietly, to move again. She did not look at the Hargrove house behind her. She did not need to. 2 floors above, behind a rain-streaked window, Chad Hargrove was already looking down. Chad Hargrove had always been the kind of man who confused proximity to power with the possession of it. He had grown up inside the Hargrove name the way certain plants grow inside greenhouses, thriving in a controlled environment, untested by actual weather, persuaded by the consistency of warmth that the warmth was a natural condition of the world rather than a constructed one. He was 31 years old, and he had never been cold. Not really. Not in the way that leaves a mark. He stood at the second-floor window with one hand on the curtain and watched the black car at the end of the alley. He watched Serena move toward it, the broken sandal, the soaked dress, the careful way she held herself upright that he recognized now, with the specific discomfort of retrospect, as the posture of someone who had been holding themselves upright through circumstances he had never thought to ask about. He watched the man beside her. He watched the man's stillness. He watched the way the man stood in the rain without appearing to notice the rain, without hunching against it or turning his collar up or performing any of the ordinary human negotiations with discomfort, as though the rain had assessed him and decided not to bother. Chad watched all of this and felt something he did not immediately have a name for. It arrived as a coldness in his chest that had nothing to do with the November air seeping through the window frame. It arrived as a sudden and unwelcome hyper-awareness of the tattoo he had glimpsed on the man's neck, even from this distance. Dark ink, bold lines, climbing upward in the specific pattern he had seen before in a photograph. A photograph his college roommate had shown him 3 years ago in a bar, on a phone screen, with the hushed and excited tone of someone sharing classified information. A tattoo that belonged to a specific organization, a specific name. He went to his mother. Brittany Hargrove was in the sitting room off the main hallway, the room she retreated to when she required the reassurance of her own taste. The curated bookshelves, the cream upholstery, the framed botanical prints that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was holding a glass of white wine, and she was composed in the manner of someone who has performed composure for so long that it has become structural. Load-bearing. The thing that holds the rest of the architecture up.
Mother. She looked at him with the patient expression she reserved for conversations she expected to find tedious. It's done, Chad. She's gone. Whatever mess you made with that woman is finished. You need to see something. I don't need to see anything. I need you to sit down and— Mother. His voice did something it almost never did. It cracked. Not with emotion, with urgency, the specific urgency of someone who has just understood the dimensions of a room they are locked inside. The man outside. The man who was with her. Do you know who that is? Brittany's expression shifted by a fraction. The fraction that, on her face, represented significant movement. She set her wine glass down on the side table with a click that was too deliberate to be casual. What man? Chad told her the name. The name landed in the sitting room the way a stone lands in still water. First the impact, then the rings moving outward, disturbing everything they reached. Brittany's face did not collapse. Brittany's face was not built for collapse, but something behind it rearranged itself, quietly and rapidly, the way furniture moves during an earthquake that has not yet become violent enough to be visible from the outside. She said, "That's not possible." "I saw the tattoo, Mother. I saw it from the window. The dragon on the neck. That's the Hyukryung mark. That's his mark. I showed you the photograph 3 years ago. You told me I was being paranoid." "You were being paranoid." "I was right." He said it without satisfaction, because there was none to be found. Serena knows Kwon Jae-won. Serena was with Kwon Jae-won. And the baby. The sentence did not need finishing. Brittany Hargrove was not a slow woman. Brittany Hargrove had built a hospitality empire on the ability to read a room faster than anyone else in it, to identify the variable that changed everything and adjust before others had finished noticing the change. She read this room now with the same rapid intelligence she had applied to every business crisis of her career, and the conclusion she arrived at settled over her face like the particular pallor of someone who has just realized they have made an irreversible mistake at the worst possible scale. She had thrown the pregnant companion of Kwon Jae-won into the rain. She had thrown the mother of Kwon Jae-won's child into the rain. She had done it with her own instructions, in front of her own security, at her own property, on a night when the man himself had been within 3 blocks and had arrived in time to witness the aftermath. She reached for her wine glass. She did not drink from it. She simply held it, the way people hold things when they need their hands to be occupied while their minds work. "We need a lawyer," she said. "Mother, a lawyer is not—" "We need a lawyer tonight. Call Richard." "Richard handles property disputes and inheritance tax. This is not—" "Then call whoever Richard calls when Richard needs a lawyer." The composure cracked, briefly, at the edges, just for a moment, just enough to show what was underneath it, which was the same thing that was underneath most performances of absolute control. Fear. Plain and unadorned, wearing an expensive suit. She pressed her fingers to her lips and steadied herself. "We will handle this. We handle everything. This family has navigated worse." Chad looked at his mother and said nothing, because he was not certain that was true, and he was not certain she believed it either. And some lies are too load-bearing to challenge out loud. The apartment Chaewon's driver delivered Serena to was on the 14th floor of a building in a part of the city where the streets were clean and the lobbies had art on the walls, and the concierge addressed you by name before you had told him what it was. The apartment itself was spare, not empty, but uncluttered, the aesthetic of someone who has eliminated everything that does not serve a purpose and found that what remains is, incidentally, beautiful. Clean lines, warm light, a view of the city that from 14 floors up looked almost peaceful, the rain turning the lights below into soft and shifting color. There was a change of clothes on the bed. Her size, approximately. She did not want to think too carefully about how that had been managed in the time between the alley and her arrival. There was food in the kitchen, warm food, delivered in the last 20 minutes by the smell of it. There was a phone on the counter,
Not her phone, a new one, already set up, with a single contact saved under the name Jay. She stood in the bathroom for a long time after the shower, wrapped in a towel that cost more than her dress, looking at herself in the mirror. She looked at the roundness that was just beginning at her abdomen, still subtle enough to be hidden under the right clothes, visible now without them. She placed both hands there, the way she had on the pavement, and stood in the warm light and had a conversation with herself that she had been postponing for 4 months. She had left him because his world was dangerous, because the tattoo on his neck was not decorative, because she had looked up the Hugh Kriung organization one evening on her laptop and spent 2 hours reading things that had made her close the screen and sit very still in the dark for a long time. Because she cared about him, had cared about him, had perhaps done something more significant than care, which was exactly the problem. And because caring about someone whose life operated at the intersection of violence and impunity seemed like a form of self-destruction she was not willing to choose. She had left him without telling him she was pregnant because she had not known. The timing was its own cruel arithmetic. The test had come back positive 9 days after she walked out, 9 days into her attempt to build a life that did not include him. And by then, she had told herself the distance was necessary, and the decision was final. And reopening the door would undo the only act of self-preservation she had managed in years. She had been wrong about the door. The door had found her. She dried her hair. She ate the food, slowly, deliberately, because the child she was carrying did not care about her emotional architecture and required feeding regardless. She sat at the window and watched the rain on the city, and thought about the open palm on the wet pavement, and the way he had picked up the ultrasound paper with 2 careful fingers, and the thing he had said, "You are not going to spend another minute on this ground," and the absolute absence of performance in it. The phone on the counter lit up. One message. No greeting, no preamble. She had forgotten that about him too. The way he communicated as though pleasantries were a foreign language he had chosen not to learn. The doctor comes at 9. You don't have to see me, but see the doctor. She looked at the message for a long time. Then she looked at the city through the rain-streaked glass and at her own reflection layered over it. Transparent, superimposed on all those lights, and understood that the version of herself who had made the decision to leave and the version of herself who was sitting here now were not the same person. 4 months, a fall, and an open palm had changed the mathematics of what she was willing to survive alone. She typed back 2 words. Okay. Fine. 3 seconds passed. His response was a single character. A period. Which, from Kwon Jae-won, she was almost certain was the closest thing to relief he knew how to send. He came at 8:45. Not at 9. The doctor came at 9, as promised, and arrived with the punctuality of someone who understood that being late to an appointment arranged by Kwon Jae-won was not a professional option. But Jae-won himself came 14 minutes before that, and he came alone, without the 2 men who accompanied him to every other location in his life as a matter of operational necessity. He knocked on the door of the apartment the way someone knocks when they are not certain they will be let in. Not hesitantly, because hesitation was not in his register, but with a restraint that acknowledged the possibility of refusal. It was, Serena thought when she heard it, the most human sound she had ever associated with him. She opened the door. He had changed out of the rain-soaked suit. He wore dark trousers and a black sweater, simple and without embellishment, and for a moment, standing in the doorway without the armor of the tailoring, he looked not smaller, nothing about him reduced, but closer to something. Closer to the version of him she had seen only in private, in the hours between midnight and dawn when the machinery of his life went quiet, and he became, briefly, provisionally, a person rather than a position. He looked at her. She had slept a few hours, shallow and fragile, but sleep nonetheless. And she had eaten, and the color had come back to her face in the way that warmth returns to something that has been too long in the cold. He registered all of this in the first 2 seconds, the rapid inventory of a man trained to assess a situation completely before responding to any part of it. "You slept," he said. "A little." "Good." He stayed in the doorway. "Can I come in?" The question stopped her. In all the time she had known him, in every space they had shared, she had never heard him ask permission for physical entry into a room. He moved through spaces, through doors, through conversations, through the defensive perimeters other people constructed around themselves, with the quiet confidence of someone who has never encountered a boundary that could not be renegotiated. And here he was, standing at the threshold of an apartment he owned, asking. She stepped back from the door. He came in and stood near the window, the same window she had sat at through the night, watching the rain slow and the city reassemble itself in the early gray light. He looked at the city for a moment, hands in his pockets, and she understood that he was giving her the room to begin, because he had said everything he intended to say in the alley, and in the text message, and in the gesture of the open palm. And what happened next belonged to her. "I should have told you," she said. He turned from the window. "When I found out," she continued, 9 days after I left, I should have called, I know that. I know it was wrong not to." She kept her voice even, because this was a conversation she had rehearsed and abandoned and rehearsed again across 4 months of sleepless nights, and she was not going to let it become something shapeless now. "I told myself it was safer. For the baby. To keep it separate from everything that your life is. I told myself I was protecting both of us." "And now?" His voice was quiet. The dragon on his neck was visible above the sweater's collar. Permanent, indelible. The declaration of everything he was and had chosen to be before she existed in his life at all. "Now I'm not sure I was protecting anything," she said. "I think I was just afraid." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Of me?" "Of how much I didn't want to leave." The silence that followed was different from the silences that had preceded it. Those had been weighted with unresolved things, with the geometry of 2 people who have not yet decided how much truth the space between them can hold. This silence was different. This one had something in it that functioned like air. Like the specific quality of air in a room where a window has just been opened after a long time closed. He crossed the room. He stopped in front of her. Close, not touching, the disciplined restraint of a man who understands that proximity is its own kind of statement and does not need to be underlined. He looked at her face with an attention so complete it was almost uncomfortable. The way being seen fully is always slightly uncomfortable, even when it is what you have wanted. "I am not a safe person," he said. "I know what I am. I have never pretended otherwise with you. That was the one thing I refused to perform. You knew, and you stayed anyway. And when you left, I understood why. And I did not come after you because I thought you had made the right decision." A pause. "I still think it was the right decision." "Jay,
But I am asking you, he continued. And the word asking arrived in his mouth like something foreign and newly learned, shaped carefully, set down with precision. Not to make it again. I am asking you to let me be. Not safe. I cannot promise you safe. But present. Consistent. Whatever the opposite of absent is, I will be that. For you. For the child. His jaw tightened slightly. The micro-expression of a man confronting a vulnerability he has not yet fully domesticated. I don't know how to be a father. I know what a father is not supposed to be. I know that with more certainty than I know most things. But I know how to learn what matters, and this... His eyes moved briefly, involuntarily, to her abdomen and back to her face. This matters more than anything I have ever been asked to protect. Serena looked at him for a long moment. You're terrifying. You know that? She said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Kwon Jae-won did not smile the way other people smiled, with the full architecture of the expression deployed all at once. It was more like the beginning of a smile, the infrastructure of one, visible only if you knew where to look. I've been told, he said. The doctor arrived at 9 exactly and was professional and thorough, and asked no questions that fell outside the strict perimeter of medical relevance, which Serena suspected was a cultivated skill in his particular line of work. The examination was careful and complete, and ended with the information that everything was progressing well. The child was healthy, the measurements were correct. The fall had caused bruising to her knee and hip, but nothing that reached further than that. The doctor left a set of prenatal vitamins on the kitchen counter, a card with a number that was answered at any hour, and departed with the quiet efficiency of someone who has learned that the best service is invisible service. Chae-won stood at the window again while the examination happened, turned toward the city, giving her privacy with a deliberateness that she noticed and filed away. The ongoing evidence of a man making choices rather than operating on instinct. Choosing consideration over the easier path of simply occupying whatever space he was in. When the doctor was gone, the apartment settled into a quiet that was no longer uncomfortable. Serena sat on the couch with the vitamin bottle in her hands, turning it over, and Chae-won sat, not beside her, but in the chair adjacent, close enough to be present, far enough to be respectful. The precise calibration of a man learning a new set of distances. The Hargroves, he said after a while. She looked up. I'm not going to do anything, he said. And she could not tell if this was reassurance or something more complicated than reassurance. Not because they don't deserve consequences, but because I want you to choose what those consequences look like. It's your story. It happened to you. She thought about Brittany Hargrove's face, the absence of recognition in it. The way a person can look at another person and simply decide, in the space of a glance, that they do not constitute a full human being deserving of consideration. She thought about the service entrance and Dale's hand on her arm, and the stone step and the wet pavement, and her own hand going to her stomach before she had even finished falling. I don't want revenge, she said. All right. I want to never have to think about them again. That, he said, I can arrange. And he did. Not through force, not through the particular vocabulary of threat and consequence that constituted the primary language of his professional life, but through the attorney and the documents and the specific and detailed letter that arrived at Brittany Hargrove's lawyer's office 7 days later, outlining with surgical precision the financial irregularities that had been identified in the Hargrove hospitality holdings over the preceding 8 years. The letter did not make demands. It did not need to. It simply existed. A demonstration of knowledge, a proof of capacity, a quiet and permanent reminder that the woman they had thrown into the rain had not been, as they had assumed, without consequence. Brittany Hargrove did not call again. Chad Hargrove moved to Portland 3 months later, which solved nothing, and which everyone understood was not intended to. The night their son was born, the hospital room was very quiet. The city was doing what cities do. Continuing, indifferent, alive, beyond the window. Chaewon sat in the chair beside the bed, and he held the child with the careful, slightly rigid posture of a man who has handled many things, but not this thing. Not this specific and terrifying weightlessness. And his face was doing something it almost never did in the presence of another person. It was open. Not soft, exactly. He was not a soft man and was not going to become one. And she did not want him to. Had never wanted the version of him that the world was. Had always wanted the version underneath it. But open. The careful architecture of his composure had set aside its own purpose for the moment, the way a very controlled person sometimes simply forgets, in the presence of something overwhelming, to maintain the performance. He looked at the child for a long time without speaking. Then he looked at her. "I don't have a name," he said. "I didn't let myself choose one. I didn't want to." He stopped, started again. "I didn't want to assume." She understood what he meant. He had not let himself plan for this, for the reality of it, for the weight of it in his arms, because planning had felt like a presumption he had not earned. She understood this about him now in a way she had not 4 months ago, had not even 1 month ago. That beneath the immovability, beneath the controlled and impenetrable surface of him, there was a man who was deeply and privately afraid of wanting things he might lose, who had built an empire in some essential way because empires do not leave. Territories do not walk out the door at night and not come back. She had walked out. She had come back. Not to him, not initially, but to the alley, to the rain, to the specific moment where his route and her fall had intersected and history had quietly, irrevocably changed direction. "I have one," she said. He waited. "Eli," she said, "if that's all right." He looked at the child, at the small face, eyes closed, indifferent to its own significance in the way that new things are always indifferent to their own significance. He looked at it the way he had looked at the ultrasound paper in the rain, with a care that had no performance in it, no audience, no calculation. Pure and unmediated and entirely unlike anything else he had ever allowed her to witness in him. "Eli," he said, testing the shape of it. He nodded, and Serena Caldwell, who had been thrown into the rain on a November night by people who had decided she did not matter, who had lain on the wet pavement with her hand on her stomach and her face turned up to the dark sky and wept with the exhaustion of someone who has been surviving for too long on too little, looked at the man with the dragon on his neck holding their son, and understood that the ground she had been building toward her entire life had not been any of the places she had tried to stand before. It was here. It was this. It was against every calculation she had ever made about safety and sense and the kind of love that was supposed to be uncomplicated,
Precisely and improbably this. The city kept going outside the window. The rain had stopped days ago. The streets were dry. She was not on the ground anymore. Serena didn't know her worth until the ground reminded her of it. But here's the truth. Most of us don't get a Kwanjewan turning that corner. Most of us just get back up alone. Quietly. Carrying more than we should. And if you've ever been dismissed by someone who assumed you had no power, no support, no one in your corner, this is for you. There's a 30-day guided reset called The Woman He Can't Manipulate, built specifically for women who are done explaining their worth, done accepting confusion dressed as love, and ready to become harder to deceive. It teaches you to spot manipulation early, stop abandoning yourself to preserve connection, and rebuild the kind of dignity that doesn't negotiate. The link is in the description, in the pinned comment, or scan the QR code on your screen right now. Because you were never powerless. You just needed the right language and the right moment to get back up. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been dismissed, humiliated, or discarded by someone who assumed you had no power, no worth, no one standing behind you? Only to discover later that their cruelty had consequences they never saw coming? Have you ever had to protect something precious, something irreplaceable, in a moment when the world gave you nothing to stand on and no one to catch you? And have you ever found that the love you tried to walk away from, the love you told yourself was too complicated and too dangerous to keep, was the very love that found you in your lowest moment and refused to leave you on the ground? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, karma, and love that defies every expectation, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.